So in many cases, when conversation turns to war-winning tanks of the Second World War, most conversations turn to the Soviet T-34, and for good reason. On the face of it, the T-34 with its speed, sloped armor, and decent gun combined with its ease of maintenance, its ability to be mass-produced made it a pretty good case for being the best overall tank of World War II. However, reality has a way of sticking its unwelcome nose into the business, and unfortunately the early war versions of the T-34 were not the war-winning machines that Kommibus and Vatniks would claim them to be. Rather, they would be a vehicle that had many teething problems, as all early vehicles do. In this video, I don't want to necessarily spend all of my time bashing the T-34, but I do want to do a little bit of myth-busting surrounding the early war versions of that T-34. This won't be a critique of the T-34 in general, but it will be a critique of early war T-34 spanning from 1941 to 1943-ish. Also, one final disclaimer. The majority of these issues would be hammered out by the end of the Second World War, and the Korean War T-34s are a very different animal than the first T-34s that first rolled off the line. The T-34 would develop into a great vehicle with later variants like the 85 model, that were more than able to match anything that the Western Allies really threw at it. But early war variants, not so much. Also, big disclaimer at the beginning, I almost lost interest in making this video entirely, so I do apologize for getting it out so late. I had school, I had a bunch of other issues, and then finals week came along, so this video is coming out a lot later than I wanted it to be. So for that, I do apologize, and I hope you enjoy this, finally, the long-awaited Myth-Busting the T-34 video. Thank you. The first myth that I want to dispel is the fact that the T-34 was only encountered in small pockets along the front line in 1941, and that the reason that the German Wehrmacht was able to bowl over the weak and outdated Soviets was because they were operating old tanks like the T-26 and the old BT series of tanks. This is in fact untrue. From day one of Barbarossa, there were T-34s and KV-1s stationed all over the various front lines. They were fighting T-34s and KV-1s from literally day one of Operation Barbarossa. Their complete and utter lack of a proper defense, the Soviets, was actually due to their crews being entirely untrained on the vehicles that they were supposed to be operating. In fact, many T-34s had not been operated at all outside of factory acceptance trials, and were sitting there entirely unused on the depots, meaning of course that the crews weren't training. Now, this of course was not the fault of the T-34, yet. But it does say a lot about the state of the Red Army. People often underestimate the importance of crew training in actual situations. You can have the best fighting vehicle in the world, but it is next to useless unless you know how to use it. And in many cases, the new and experienced Soviet crews had no idea what the bloody hell that they were doing. Myth 2, reliability. I can already hear the comments coming, lower your pitchforks people, this isn't what you think it is. Late models of the T-34 enjoyed decent to good reliability, and when something did go wrong, it was, to my knowledge, relatively easy to repair. I wasn't saying anything to that particular point. Recall that the purpose of this video was a critique on the early war T-34s. The early war T-34s, or early models, were distinctly not that reliable. In fact, they were quite unreliable, ironically. And, even more ironically, their weak link was their transmission. I know, that surprised me too. As it turns out, it wasn't just the Germans that couldn't build a good transmission, it plagued the Soviets as well. In fact, it was so bad that a lot of early T-34s, such as this one that I found, carried a spare transmission on the back of the tank. Yeah, that says a lot, doesn't it, when you need to carry a spare final drive on your tank's engine deck, because not only could you might have a failure, but actively predict or expect an impending failure. The Germans, surprisingly, did not have this problem. And here I have to do another mini myth bust, this time on the German side. The early war German tanks were they were decently reliable. They weren't great, but they were decently reliable. I know, what blasphemy is this? But seriously, the German Panzer III and 38Ts enjoyed decent reliability. The T-34, however, was not. It suffered from frequent equipment failure, among other things. I mean, the engine itself, while later models of the V2 proved to be bulletproof, early models, not so much. In fact, to my knowledge, it was standard practice in the Red Army to change out any T-34's engine before any big operation if that drivetrain had been operating for more than, I want to say, around 40 hours. So, early war T-34s, not very reliable. Late war T-34s, very reliable. Myth number 3, sloped armor. Okay, this is a big one. But when the conversation turns to the T-34, much emphasis is often placed upon the sloped armor and how it was a revolutionary technique at the time. Well, in short, it kind of wasn't. Sloping a surface to offer better protection had been known since the early 20th century, and even with the very first of armored vehicles. For example, this FT-17 or the A7V, the frontal plates are sloped. Yes, very obliquely, but sloped nonetheless. The benefits of sloped armor were very well known. And up until this point, you already had tanks that were coming out which had sloped armor. The problem is volumetric in nature. Let me explain. When you slope the armor inwards like that on a T-34's hull, yes, you increase the relative effectiveness of that armor, but it also decreases the usable interior space. Let's compare the T-34 to its closest spiritual ally, that being the M4 Sherman. And here my biases as a freebie will show, but do bear with me. The Sherman features a lot of internal volume. Yes, this makes the tank ish tall. It's not that tall, but bear with me. But there's places to put your crew, to put other miscellaneous items, etc., and there's room for the crew to move around and stretch if necessary. Granted, it's a tank, so there's not that much room, but if you get into a Sherman, and even the Chieftain with his 1.9 meter self can fit quite comfortably in a Sherman, or even a Panzer III. Not so much in a T-34, and this moves on to my next myth. Myth 4 centralizes upon ergonomics. The T-34, due to its Christie suspension already eating much of the space, combined with the sloping of that armor, and that many T-34s did not have a goddamn turret basket or hell, even chairs, make it so that the interior of the T-34 is extremely uncomfortable, but more than that, extremely cramped. The Christie suspension, then the reason why there are not a lot of tanks that have the Christie suspension, or basically none in modern times, is because it's, number one, quite complicated, but number two, because it takes up a lot of room. In fact, it takes up so much room that there really is no space left for the crew to go. Which means if you look at the interior of a T-34, you can actually see that the driver is jammed up right beside the co-driver, and the gunner's feet are just right behind over there. It's a very uncomfortable tank to be in. And when a tank is uncomfortable to be in, it's not a very good tank to fight in. The crew were lucky to get off maybe 1 to 2 rounds a minute. In the Panzer III, off the top of my head, I believe it was 3 to 4 rounds a minute, and in a Sherman, it was as high as 5 rounds a minute. Also, if you're expected to travel in a tank, as Russian crews often were, then get to the battlefield, then proceed to fight in that tank, you need a tank that is comfortable or relatively comfortable to be in, because only then can you actually be expected to be an effective crew. Many T-34 crews upon arriving to the battlefield were terribly exhausted, meaning that decreased the fightability of your unit somewhat. The human factors are often overlooked in times of war, but the human factors can exactly be what turns the tide of battle for better or for worse. So what am I saying from all this? The T-34 is not a comfortable machine. Rather, it is one of the most uncomfortable machines. And also, T-34 drivers carried hammers. No, that is not a myth. Shut up. Okay, so what has this video meant, or rather what I was trying to do? Well, I simply wanted to show that the T-34 was not perfect. Rather, it was an extremely flawed tank. The early war variants were an extremely flawed tank. Obviously, these issues were ironed out with later and later models, but however, this really doesn't encompass the entire history of the T-34. There are several myths of the Soviet Union during the Second World War that I want to spend some time on this channel to myth bust as we move on through and through. Of course, those projects will come much down the line. I have some more stuff in the works that I want to get to first. But right now, I find the time to dispel the most common of those myths, and that was the myth of the indestructible T-34. Anyway, thanks for watching, and thank you for waiting for this video to come out, and after, what is it, 2 months of saying that it would come out? Anyways, I'm going to move this channel. I'm going to put a hold on the tank videos, but until then, I will see you next time. Bye-bye, everyone.
Расцветали яблони и круши, поплыли туманы над рекой. Приходила на берег Катюша, на высокий берег, на крутой. Приходила на берег Катюша, на высокий берег, на крутой. Приходила, песню заводила, пластя